You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for hitting that play button. This is another episode of Dave Bullis Podcast. Before we get to today's episode, I just want to mention a couple of really quick things. Number one, if you go to davebullis.com, there is a free coupon for Backstage Basic Listing. So if you go there and you're in pre-production for your movie project, this will give you a free basic listing, and you'll be able to do this for free. Again, no catches involved. And also, there's a link for the Dave Bullis Facebook group. This is the Facebook group for this podcast, and you can actually get in there. And I answer a lot of questions in there. I talk a lot about the show, and basically, it's a group that I wanted to make because I got tired of seeing all these other groups, and it was just nothing but crowdfunding campaigns being posted or the same question being posted. This group's a lot different than that. So if you're serious about being a filmmaker, join the group. We chat about a whole bunch of other stuff and a lot of really cool stuff going on in there. As always, if you find anything interesting in any of the episodes, please share it, as it helps immensely. I cannot tell you how much it helps. And before I get to today's conversation, I just want to mention one other quick thing. This conversation drops a bit here and there. That's just how this call is recorded, so I apologize for that. If when it does drop, it's only for like a second. And I've tried to resurrect it here and there, but again, it just kind of like fades in and out. But again, it's only for a second. Honestly, you'll probably notice it, but I've done my best to resurrect it without damaging the good audio. So it is what it is. But it's still a fantastic conversation. It's just a little dent in usually how good the connection is. But don't let that deter you. This is a fantastic episode, and I don't like to play favorites, but this is actually one of my favorite episodes because I grew up watching USA's Up All Night all the time. I remember when this was on, I found so many movies because of USA's Up All Night. And my guest this week was the host of USA's Up All Night from 1991 to 1998. She's acted in TV shows like Happy Days, Married with Children, Duckman, just to name a few. In 2001, she launched her own woman's intimate line, and she has the #1 selling bra in the world. And her new book, Up All Night, From Hollywood Bombshell to Lingerie Mogul, Life Lessons from an Accidental Feminist, is out on October the 3rd, 2017, so that'll be next month. In this episode, we chat a lot about movies, finding the courage to follow your dreams, reinventing yourself at any age. It's just tons more. Again, one of my favorite episodes. This is episode 177 with guest Rhonda Shear.
You're listening to the Dave Bullis Podcast.
Happy to speak to you. Heard nothing but amazing things about you, so thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you, Ron. I really appreciate that. And, I really wanted to have you on, too, because I grew up watching Up All Night, or USA's Up All Night. And I remember...
Oh, wait. Let me do it, Dave. Wait. USA Up All Night. I know I have to do it or you'd be sad, so I have to get it out.
I remember that all the time. I mean, sometimes I wouldn't even remember the movies, but I would remember that because I remember too finding a lot of movies I'd never heard of before from that intro, and I just remember that intro. The first time I ever saw it was you doing that, and I remember like it was so great because it's so catchy. You know what I mean? It's so memorable.
Absolutely. And it's so funny that you say that because, when I first, there was another gal before me that hosted Up All Night with Gilbert. I was always on Friday, and Gilbert Gottfried was on Saturday. And I'm blanking on her name right now. But anyway, you might be able to think. Caroline Schlitt. And so she was there about a year and a half before I got there. And I know people really loved her, and I thought she was actually very good. But, it was USA Network that wanted to replace her for whatever reason. And I think they were going a little bit, they thought it being a little bit sexier. They wanted to kind of go for it. So I did. But I always thought when I got it, I always thought, you have to come up with kind of a catchphrase. And because years ago, I'm from New Orleans, and when I was in New Orleans, I used to do this commercial for, it was an all-female, like class, like all the the gyms that were mixed. They used to have like men gyms, female gyms. Anyway, it was called a shape spa for all women. And I used to, and the catchphrase was, let's get in shape. So that was kind of like my thing. I mean, I did it all through my teens and in my 20s. And so it always caught. And wherever I would go in New Orleans, everybody would go, oh, it's the shape spa girl. So anyway, that kind of brought me back to that. And so I said, I have to come up with some way of saying the show that kind of catches. And so hence that's how that was born. And of course it was the a little bit of the ditzier character, but if you really listened to the character, you know, it was fun and smart comedy. But if you would just, I guess, channel surfing, you would just see a lot of blonde hair, a lot of cleavage, and up all night. But anyway, it was good. It was a good run, almost 8 years. So kind of cool to have that long run on a show, on any show on TV.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely amazing because I actually looked it up because I didn't even know the total number of episodes off the top of my head. I mean, there's like 900 episodes of Up All Night. And I mean,
right,
and you did it for like 8 years. I mean, that's an insane number of episodes.
It really is. Well, you know what it is? It's because we taped every week as opposed to like, you know, most episodic shows are like 22 a season, but we were on every week. So we would either tape every week and then the show moved to New York for a while. I didn't move to New York, but we would go to New York and tape 4 or 5, you know, bank them, and then they would air. So it was really cool to have that much fun. And I had, unfortunately or fortunately, I guess, they kept changing producers and directors on me. I don't know what they wanted, but actually, in looking back, I'm still friendly with all these people, and each one brought something else to the table. Well, of course, in the very early years, it was really sexy and sassy and a lot of lingerie and for a couple of years. And then it kind of changed and it became more interview style. And then when we got to New York, it really changed. But I think people remember the earlier years. But for me, as a performer, they were all cool because I really got to, you know, have a lot of say in what I wanted to do. So if you watch the late, like even the last year, we did a lot of, I did a lot of impressions of like Lucille Ball and Cher, and like I parodied a lot of my favorite ladies of television. So that was really cool. But yeah, I did 450 episodes myself, and I think I'm the only one that has most. I mean, I have probably at least 400. Might be missing a few, but I actually had them. You know, that was part of my contract that they had to give me a videotape of everything. So most of those have been down or uploaded, I should say, and then a lot of them are still on DVD. So eventually we'll get to them and put them all on YouTube, but I'm the only one. That they literally, USA Network disposed of them back then because of the tape, just saving tape. Can you imagine what a shame? So I think even the producers, some of the producers have a few shows, but I have most of them. Of course, I don't have the movies. I used to have all the movies. What they would do, USA Network would send me the movies to watch. And, you know, of course, then, you know, we would, you know, do the wraparounds later on. I should have saved all those movies, although I wouldn't have had the rights to them myself. But people always say, do you have this film? Do you have that? And back in the day, I did. But for my own storage, I couldn't really, you know, we actually did 3 movies, or I hosted 3 movies every Friday night. So we hosted and wrapped around 2. And then the third one was just voiceover, but they would send me all the movies ahead of time. So I would have had a really great collection of B films if I would have kept them all. But, you know, it's funny. It's a genre that is kind of coming back. Even a few years ago, I was asked to do a film, and everyone really misses that genre and the fact that it was kind of innocent. Like everybody thought you would see more skin or hear more language than you really got. So it was kind of titillating without being nasty or what have you. So anyway, interesting time. I'm glad I was part of it. And even being part of early basic cable, which was USA Network, was the first full-out basic cable. So very cool time. I'm glad I was part of it, of course. And it led to, obviously, many other opportunities and wonderful things.
Yeah, I was going to say there really is nothing like this on TV anymore because this, you know, as I was saying earlier, introduced me to a lot of films that I wouldn't have seen otherwise, you know, because, again, you know, your character was great. It was engaging. You actually enjoyed, you know, doing what you were doing. You know, again, I imagine watching all these movies, you know, you're probably, you know, you're getting a feel for these movies. You know, this one's a comedy.
Right.
You know, Nightmare on Elm Street, obviously that's, you know, more of a horror. But, you know,
yeah.
But, you know, it really is nothing like this.
No, and it's sad. And believe me, I still have fans reach out to me and say, I really miss this. I mean, I grew up with this. Of course, I always kid and say I got a lot of boys to puberty. I think I did, but I had a lot of female fans of the show too, as well. But there isn't anything. I mean, of course, Elvira was, she was syndicated. I know Cassandra Peterson, and then they had Joe Bob Briggs, and then they had, I guess the later one was The Dinner and a Movie, which was a knockoff of us in a way, but they were all good in their own way. And then I don't know of any. There might be still some local people that do it. I mean, all of this spurned from local people that did it back in the day, and even Elvira started off as a local show on Channel 5 in LA, and then that became syndicated. But now it's a shame. It's a sweet. Look, it's really all about. I mean, what it was about then was making people tune in to the commercials and keeping them entertained with these films, so that USA would make money off the ads. Well, I don't think anybody realizes it, but that little show made a fortune for USA Network off the ads, and that funded a lot of their early original programming, like La Femme, Nikita, and other shows like that. So we were like this little cable show that cost very little to produce, that was making some big dollars, some big bucks for the network. So good time to be in TV. You can experiment a little bit. It's fun. I hosted the show from 91 to 98. Everybody thinks it was in the 80s because I kept my hair big, but I didn't start till January of 91, and just had a great time with it.
Yeah, and I remember some of those other USA shows too. By the way, you mentioned La Femme Nikita, and I remember you remember Duckman, that show.
Duckman, yeah, I actually did a couple of episodes of it as Rhonda. I wasn't a duck. I mean, I was Rhonda, and then we had Science. I was on an episode of that. I was on what was that other show? I wasn't on La Femme Nikita. Darn, I'm blanking on the other name of the show. I can't believe I can't think of it, but. Then they started off, which really made them put before Up All Night was Night Flight, which is a lot of people still remember. I vaguely remember, but because it was before me, but that was their first kind of out there programming of interstitial late night television. So it was a really cool network to be part of in the early days. And then they got into. I don't watch USA as much. I just don't even watch a lot of television, but I'm told that it was better back in the day. I think it was just that it was a little more raw and a little bit more experimental, and everything is so much more reality today than scripted. Because we were a little bit of both. We had a loose script, and then a lot of like flying by the seat of our pants. But it would take about 12 hours to film those. I mean, because I would fill anywhere between 30 minutes of time to an hour, depending on how much was cut out of the films, how much was, how short the films are. So it just depended on the film. So sometimes I would have to fill a longer period. So people thought that we were live. We were never live, and we taped in the day usually, unless we were doing a night event or something. And we shot for hours. It was definitely a lot more hard work than I think people thought. But I had a blast, and I had great people in my life, and that produced it and directed it, and a lot of people that were young people that started off and went on to do amazing things, like one of the young producers, I think he produces Bill Maher now. So, I mean, they went on to do some pretty amazing things in their careers after that.
Yeah, and you mentioned one thing too, Rhonda, which is about how TV is nowadays. And, I wanted to get your take on this. I think back in the 90s and even the 80s, where a lot of these like new TV shows, were breaking ground, and they were something new and they were fresh. My whole take on this, and something that I've noticed, is that they let the hosts like yourself be themselves. And they really didn't say, hey, Rhonda, here's a 90-page script you have to memorize. They then, would let you be yourselves. And I think as we get along to TV nowadays, it's more of, here's a script, read it, and don't venture off this script. And I think it really makes a lot of shows too cookie cutter, because all the characters start talking the same. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And even in reality, which everybody thinks is reality, I can tell you this. I mean, some of my friends I did a lot of talk shows and hosted on talk shows back in that era. And a lot of those young producers are now the people who are kicking butt in reality TV. So I did a lot of basically reality TV, but they were just segments then. Reality TV is not so real. I mean, yes, they don't necessarily have scripts that they memorize, but the producers really push you into situations. And they'll say, oh, I'd like to see you and that guy and that girl, and I'd like to see this happen. So you're kind of pushed. Those reality shows aren't necessarily as real. So, I mean, they kind of stir the pot to make, tension happen. And I just, because of that, it's kind of manufactured in its own way. That's why a lot of reality shows all feel the same, because it's the same thing. They're pushing for fighting, or they're pushing for, for stuff to happen. So it's not organic. And yeah, we had a really good time. I mean, even if we were scripted and we had certain jokes that were scripted, I mean, Gilbert and I were really able to be ourselves, and it was really fun to experiment with that. Yeah. And by the way, we had so many guests on, both of us. I mean, Gilbert had all these great comedians in New York, and I had great comics, and I also had cheerleaders, and, I had actors and actresses and stand-up comics and just all kinds of people, singers and, from all walks of life. And that was fun. That kind of came into Rhonda's world back then. So, yeah, I mean, and then we would shamelessly promote whatever, if they had a movie out or a book out, we would promote them, and we had fun with it. And we would kid about how shameless we are. And we would do spoofs off of Letterman was big at the time, and his list of 10. And so we would do our own list of craziness. And I had all kinds of fans. I had foot fetish fans that loved my feet and my shoes and all that. So we would cater to, whoever would really write us and really pay attention, we would give them a shout out. And no, you don't see that happening anymore, where you really cater to your fans. Yeah, we did. We took the fan mail really. We'd have fan mail nights where we just read fan mail, and that was fun.
And you would also just, because you were being yourself, and it was also, you were having fun, and you were having fun with it, because you could just go on, be yourself. And like you said, you did have some scripted jokes, but they allowed you, you were a character, and
right.
That's why I think a lot of today, it's harder and harder. It's almost like they want to homogenize things in terms of, like, I mean, how it is. So somebody probably looked at, a sheet or something and said, well, hey, people really are responding to this on that show. So what if we did this? And that's what I think happens today is you have people who've been looking at, like, so many numbers and stuff like that they just think that,
right.
Hey, look, we have a formula we've made, and if we plug this formula in, we're going to make hit after hit after hit. And I think that's what
right. You're 100% right. It's more scientific today than it is organic, and that is kind of sad. I agree, because I've pitched TV shows, and in the beginning, I mean years ago, I wanted to do a reality show because there was so much craziness in my life. I manufacture and produce undergarments, which of course was came out of wearing so many intimate apparel on up all night. But I thought it was such a funny business to be in. I mean, you're actually talking panties and bras. And I pitched it, and people would, they liked it, but they wanted it. They wanted to see. My husband's my business partner, and they wanted to see us fighting and have him, me being jealous of the models. And I said that isn't happening. I mean, I'm not going to make up something that's not real. And I mean, these producers, I had this one producer who's very successful, but he kept pushing. You know what your husband's thinking when he's looking at the models. And I said, you're trying to make something happen that doesn't happen. I mean, my husband, we both can look at beautiful girls and think they're beautiful, but that doesn't mean he lusts or wants, that you're trying to make something happen that's completely untrue. So that's what happens on those reality shows. I think it's kind of yucky.
Yeah.
So we didn't agree to go down that road at all. I mean, that's a bad road to go down.
Oh yeah. And I mean, that would cause you problems off camera as well, because,
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's just bad. It's just bad. And then besides that, it's not who I am. I'm not negative. That's not who I am as a person. And that's not how I talk to my customers. I'm more of a positive, flirty, fun, I kid about my husband, but I don't believe in negative and nastiness. I mean, a lot of these people end up getting divorces and some bad stuff happening on these reality shows, and I do think it's the fault of the producers for pushing them down certain bad roads.
Oh yeah.
Don't need to do that. Yeah, don't need any of that in my life. I'd rather the positive. There's enough negative that happens, that you don't want to happen. There's always things in business or life, but you don't need to push that into your life. And that's what they want. They always want to have that kind of yin and yang and the fight and people fighting and arguing and pulling hair. And I'm like, not me.
Yeah, it's kind of like Jersey Shore. I think that reality show, ruined a lot of producers because, we need more of that. And it's like, that was so manufactured.
True.
And, now it's like, or the Kardashians. That was another show, I think, that just, it was a... I think, again, like we were talking about formulas, and I think that was too much of a lot of where producers could look at that and say, hey, see, we could be that, that show. Look
right.
At that, look at what Kim can do from that show. It's like, well, yeah, it's that's not something most people really
or all the housewife shows.
Yeah.
That's the fact that they keep me. I've never watched any of them. And people say, have you ever seen? I said, I've never seen any of them. They just don't intrigue me or interest me at all. And I know what they're doing. I totally get it. I mean, hey, good for them if that makes them happy. But, I like the old-fashioned days of people becoming celebrities because they actually had talent.
Mm-hmm.
I was a stand-up comic for many years, and the Jerry Seinfelds were around, and those people, and that's where I came from. People had to really be funny and write a good joke, and my days of stand-up, and no one was kind of doing the sexier stand-up comedy, female comedy at all when I started in 1984, 85. And so it was kind of a category. They didn't know what to do with me. But, I ended up getting booked and headlining and all over. But, nowadays I would have been right in there with the Amy Schumers. But back then they didn't want that. Of course, I'm a feminist in my own way, but not the way these women are. Like the Amy Schumer movies, she's attacking the guy. I'm still that old-fashioned girl that's like, I want the guy, coming on to the girl and being flirty, but I don't like it. It's just I like just a little bit more old fashioned in my life. I think it's sexier.
Yeah.
But whatever you want to call it, I don't know if it's old fashioned, but that's just the way I was brought up, and I still think, I still think guys like that at the end of the day. I don't think they necessarily love aggressive women and that are that aggressive. You can still be a feminist. That's what my book's about, by the way. I do have a book out, that will be actually hitting it's on pre-sale right now on Amazon called Up All Night. And it's the life and journey of an accidental feminist, which I really think my life was, because I did so many, pageants. I was in Miss Louisiana, and then I was a Saints cheerleader back in New Orleans, and then I went on to Los Angeles and did Happy Days, and, was co-starred on a lot of television, and then eventually Up All Night. And then I reunited with my high school sweetheart 16 years ago, and we started the current business I am, the Rhonda Shear brand of intimate apparel. And so it was about, my book covers, my early life. I ran for public office when I was young. It talks about that, how I was accepted to law school, but then I went to Hollywood, and I was typecast immediately as a sexy girl, and I thought it, but it didn't work. So eventually I just went with it. And so the book has all these life lessons on how to use what's God-given. And, basically I was a feminist in my own way and stood my ground, and always did, and always got things my way, but I also used the things that were given to me in life. So I didn't, I wasn't this aggressive or outwardly aggressive woman. But yeah, I did fight for my own rights, just I did it my way. So the book has a lot of life lessons and tips, along with comedy and a lot of pictures from Up All Night and my younger life, and I'm really excited. It actually, like I said, it's on pre-sale right now on Amazon. Called Rhonda is Up All. Actually, it's called Up All Night by Rhonda Shear. But it literally will be out October 3rd is when everything hits HSN and all the other places. So we're in bookstores. So we're very excited about it.
And I'm going to link to that in the show notes, everybody, because I actually saw Rhonda was writing the book, and I thought this would be a great time to approach you, Rhonda, about coming on this podcast, because I'm
Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Again, thanks for coming on, and I will link to that in the show notes because again, I love the title, obviously, and again, some of the things you were just talking about using your strengths and and using not trying to fight resistance. You know what I mean? Like people were saying to you, hey Rhonda, this or that, the other thing, and you just mentioned about, finding your talents and finding what you really like to do and are very good at. And you use that, and you were able to, build this whole empire you have now. You have a clothing line,
Yes.
which is doing very well, by the way. I actually, to prep for this interview, I actually looked it up, and I didn't know you have like the #1 selling bra in the world, I think.
Yes, it's called the bra, which I always believed in taglines. And it's just very comfortable, wireless, no hooks and eyes bra. And it took off. I started doing it in 2003. It really took off like in 2009, 10. And then we did an infomercial. Then lo and behold, it became the best-selling bra in the world with over 35 million sold in 34 countries. And we continue to do the bra along with other bras. So we basically came up with a category of bras. And we also started, after bra, then we have the lifestyle of clothing. And now I'm starting another loungewear line called Dreams by Rhonda Shear. So it's really exciting. And this was something that came out of my husband and I getting married and reuniting. And we started this business just to work together because we hadn't seen each other really since we were kids. And he was living in Louisiana and I was living in Hollywood. And we put this together never thinking that it would have the success that it did. But, we both complemented each other as business people, and me as the spokesperson, he, behind the scenes and the financial end of it. So very cool. So the book talks about love later in life and finding your soulmate. It talks about, becoming an entrepreneur later in life and that you can reinvent at any age. And so I have a lot of tips along with being really funny. I mean, there's some really funny stories in there in my Hollywood stories and some fun pictures. So I think it's a book for everyone to read, both men and women. I think will really enjoy it. Then I have to say, accomplishing and writing a book is something I always wanted to do. And I actually am getting ready to start my second one because it kind of gets into your blood. But I have to say, it's like one of the prouder things that I've done is like, actually writing down, because I really feel I have a lot to share with a lot of people. And you also want to remember some of those amazing moments in your life. And because I get up and I do a lot of speeches, and people love to hear my story and my story with my husband. And, it's a very loving tale of two people who were first loves. We met when we were 12 and 13 and then getting back together and then starting a business. I mean, gosh knows, you never even dream of that. That's why you kind of have to go sometimes where life leads you. And again, that's like not manufactured. So people want you to manufacture this stuff. And I just feel like you have to be really real in life and very authentic and stick with whatever you're doing. And, all dreams can come true.
Yeah, you mentioned about reinventing yourself. If there's one thing I've learned about this podcast is I've interviewed people from all walks of life, and one thing that they've all sort of mentioned is one way or another is reinventing themselves. Some people they didn't pick up a camera until they were 40, 50 years old, and they were able to go out and make films. And some people they ended up winning Sundance, and they ended up just sort of doing something completely different now. And it's amazing.
It's taking chances, Dave. And when my husband and I got together, he was living in Louisiana, I was living again in LA. We took a chance and we moved to Florida after a couple of years to start our business because Home Shopping Network, which is known as HSN, now it's branded as HSN, is located in Florida. So we figured if we moved here that it would really help our business move it along, would be in front of the right people. And it did. But so many people are so complacent where they live and what they do that they won't take that chance. So it's one of the things I always tell young entrepreneurs and all people is that sometimes you have to, what's the worst that'll happen? You can always go back home or back but to where you began. But if you don't take a chance at something, and people get stuck in ruts and won't do it. So when you talk about these people, I am sure, and when you interview these people, I am sure that they all took chances. And there's some of us that will do that and some that won't. So I always like to encourage people that, hey, it's cool. It's okay. Go for it. Nothing bad will happen. You'll always wonder in your life if you don't, just like you doing the podcast. I mean, I'm sure it's amazing and that you keep learning things. And, it's amazing to interview people and hear how they've made it or how they've changed. And I use the word reinvent, but it's not even that I started out to reinvent. My husband and I got married. We both had to change, directions, career for different reasons. I wasn't I wasn't 21 and doing the sexy girl stuff anymore. Not that I couldn't be the sexy older girl, but, you have to be real in where you are in your life. And yet I didn't want to stop working. So it's just like, okay, well, let me continue doing something that is I love, near and dear to me. I can still be myself, but it's just another extension of myself. And my husband as well. He was a businessman. He had never done anything in the, obviously, apparel world, but he just applied everything that he knew about business to what we're doing. Same thing. So a lot of people are just afraid to do that, and no reason to be. So, living in my dream house in Florida, I got the 5 dogs, very happy. And we don't know where life will take us next. The book is exciting because that's kind of taking me on another journey. I'm getting offers to make speeches and appearances and some TV talk shows, and just hired a publicist, and he's got some really exciting plans. I'm going to do a book signing in New Orleans the weekend of October the 27th, and then, which is a fun weekend because it goes almost right into Halloween. And then we're going to do a book signing here in Florida, St. Petersburg, Tampa area, the weekend of October 14th. So, just those 2 things I am so excited about, because I'm sure I'll get a lot of my Up All Night fans. I'm sure I'll have some fans who watch me on HSN and are big, customers of my brand. So it's neat. You just living life. I don't look back and go, gee, I wish I was still this age, or I still wish I was. I just look forward and think, wow, I still got time to accomplish a lot more.
Yeah,
so it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And you probably took a chance writing that book because, I have a friend of mine who's a professional author, and he said, if you actually think about writing a book and what it really is, he goes, it's only been around for this little sliver in human history, and being able to, write an actual book, put it together. And then he said, if you look at it again in the world that we live in now, Rhonda, you make a Kindle version, you can do self-publishing, you can go through a publisher, you have a lot of options.
Yes.
And that's even a smaller sliver. And he said, if you think about what it means to write a book, he goes, you as a human being are sitting down and writing, 5 digits, in words. So it's a couple thousands upon thousands of words, and compiling it together, all these thoughts. And I mean, it's time consuming. And I mean, you probably thought to yourself, hey, I could write this book, or I could go do another thing. I mean, and so you really have to make a choice and take a chance.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I love that your friend put it that way. I've never thought about it, but it's true. And I did put it off for years, and then because I've been wanting to do it, but I just felt like it was the right time with everything that was going on in my life. So finally, I just sat down. I did have a ghostwriter that kind of put my thoughts into the right order, and then I completely rewrote what he did. And then he loved what I did. I mean, I literally took it and started not over, but just, it had to have my voice completely. And then after that, he then took that and really pulled it together. So it was a really, because I had never structured a book. And as a new author, you really have to have that right structure. So, it holds people's attention, and it's my life. Because even when Tim Vanderhey is my ghostwriter's name, he's fabulous. I don't mind admitting it at all, but he just, really made me understand, the process, and again, holding the attention. And we went back and forth of how, because a lot of my things start in one part of my life, so it kind of like goes back, and it keeps going back to certain stories. So I think that's where I needed help, because I would start, I'd say, if I start from the very beginning, then it's going to get boring if I just go through my life. So we would start, we started at a certain birthday, and then we told some stories there. So it's very compelling. I'm very excited about it. And again, we put the life lessons in. We also put is basically like a bubble over my head. So I express to the reader what is going on in my head, like even what I was thinking when I was in a beauty pageant. So how did I feel when I was on stage and in front of an audience with just a swimsuit on? So even though I was young, I never really, what was going on in your mind. And I think that really gives an insight to the people who read it of what was really happening in my head and what motivated me to continue to do what I did through life. And I'm just really excited about it. So the second book that I'm already concocting in my brain is perfect because it has to do with self-body image and how we look in the mirror as women. So that covers my brand, but it also covers, who I am and then how, through life, you gain weight, you lose weight, you get women become self-conscious, but then, so it deals with it, but I'm going to do it with a lot of levity and a lot of comedy. So I'm already putting thoughts down about that. And then I could put a lot of the stories that I couldn't fit into the book. I can add those stories back into, because it was hard when we edited it that a lot of the stories I would have loved in were taken out, but you can't put everything in. So this way I get to put back a few of the stories and add to it and tell some more tales, because I do kiss and tell a little bit in the book about some of my Hollywood stories and people I dated, and that's kind of fun. And it's not done viciously. It's just, it's just real. There's nothing in it that isn't 100% authentic and real. So, but that's cool what your friend said, who's the author.
Yeah.
I could see becoming very addicted to that. Now, when I wrote my book, though, here was the only obstacle I had. So I've got these 4 little chihuahuas and a Yorkie. So I'm sitting there writing, and they wouldn't let me write at my desk. So I had to write downstairs on the couch, on the computer, and basically they were climbing over me. So months and months of dogs climbing. Now, I think that takes a special talent to be able to have dogs on your computer and write. More so than anything. But it's a great feat when you finish it, and and then the only thing is, this is when you need, sometimes I think, and you definitely need an editor, but because you just don't know when, you think it's over, and then you think of, oh, I have this one more thing, and then you need that other eye, even outside of my husband or whoever read it, to look at it and go, okay, you're done. You don't need it. You'll write again and you'll put it in there. So it is an interesting process, especially your first book.
Yeah, it's funny because the friend of mine who's an author who actually said that to me, he said the first, because he and I would talk back and forth, and I've actually had him on this podcast before, and he said to me that the hardest part about anything is actually starting it. And I said, well, what's the second hardest part? And he goes, finishing it. And I said,
yes,
because you, just like you said, you get stuck in that endless loop of rewrites. Like, oh, should I keep this? No, should I not keep this? And then you just have to get out of your own head.
I mean, that's what I did. I completely rewrote, I completely rewrote it from scratch. And then it took a different turn. But, at the end of the day, it's exactly where I wanted to be, because I think what it was it was more autobiographical in the beginning. And I do have a book agent. And even though we've self-published it, we may still bring it to, a major publishing house, which you can do now. And I do have a book agent in Los Angeles. And when he first started, he goes, it's great. It's autobiographical. I can't believe all the things you've done in your life. It's amazing. But the big publishing houses don't necessarily buy complete autobiographical books now. So, and he's a really big book agent who deals with just the big houses, So he said, I think it needs to have more insight. And I didn't know how to do that at first. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out how to take what I had already and then, make it insightful. So that's when I started thinking of the bubble, like people always want to know, what is that person really thinking, And so it became like the bubble over my head. And then also each chapter will have life lessons that I learned at that part of my life. So it really goes back to it has my up all night years. It has my, years as a Miss Louisiana and my New Orleans upbringing. I mean, and that in itself is interesting to grow up in New Orleans. And then finding love. So each chapter really has something for everybody. An entrepreneur, I think, will give a lot of people insight to how to start a business and how to keep going with it and not give up. So, I think, it tells the story of my life, but it also has lessons. I think it's important to even if someone has no idea who I am, they will pick it up and just read, okay, this was a woman who, when I started, if I can't call it kind of the Bill Cosby years, because when I was in Hollywood, we don't know who knows what happened and what didn't happen then, but I can tell you I was in Hollywood in the 80s and in that era, and guys would push themselves on you, and they would say, if you don't sleep with me, I will get you blackballed from the business. Now, I never went down that route. Maybe if I would have been a bigger star. But it wasn't who I am. I always kid about that. If I would have slept around, maybe, it would have worked, but it wasn't me. I came from this nice Southern strict family, and it wasn't who I was. I mean, it just wasn't. I had boyfriends, but they weren't, I never chose the big producer types that came after me. Believe me, some big ones came through my life, but no one was going to push that down my throat. And, pardon the pun, but, I was not going down that road of, I had to live with myself. So, everything I got on my own. I didn't have family in the business. I knew no one when I first got to Hollywood. And literally, I just did it the old-fashioned way of auditioning. And again, when you look at Hollywood today, it is connections, and it is who your father and mother is. But I moved there. I didn't know a soul. So I'm proud of that. I'm proud that I got where I got on my own, and did get a name for myself, and did end up headlining as a stand-up comic when I was told, you're too pretty or you're too sexy to be a comedian. And I was like, to hell with that. I will do it. I stood in line at the Comedy Store until I got on stage and the Improv, until finally I got all the way up to headlining in Vegas. So, I mean, I feel like I really accomplished things that I wanted to. And pretty much the book talks about, whenever anybody would tell me I couldn't do something, it would make me try harder. I mean, I've been told that my whole life. I was either too pretty or too sexy to do this, or I was, ahead of my time doing stand-up with short dresses, mini skirts. No one was doing it. You had to be a frumpy mother, or even in my lingerie business, you can't do that. There's too many other brands out there. You can't start. Who's going to buy your brand? So pretty much my whole life has been you can't, and I have. So that just shows you that anybody can do it. If you just can't listen to negativity. I am a glass half full person, not a half empty person, and I think that makes a difference. Just who you are, And so when I started the book, I'm like, well, will anybody read it? I really feel like, after having the few people I have that have read it, and the people that are like major people, like, I have a friend who's one of the presidents at MGM, and he loves the book. And that really made me feel good, because these people had a lot of manuscripts go past their death. So who knows? Maybe one day it'll be a book. I mean, not a book, a movie.
Yeah.
Hopefully not a B movie, but I'll take a B movie too. I'm fine with that.
It would be really meta if you actually introduced it on like a special edition of USA Up All Night, and you introduced your own movie.
Well, what's really funny, Dave, is the very first thing I did on Up All Night was the very first movie I ever introduced was, or rather on USA Up All Night, was Basic Training, which is a movie I starred in, which had 3 seconds of toplessness, which I was mortified to do at the time. It was in my contract that it didn't have to be more than 3 seconds. And of course, I went on to do Playboy in '91, called Girls of the of Comedy, which I actually brought that idea to them. And then that next year, Up All Night had taken off, and so they came back and offered me a celebrity pictorial, and so that was really cool. So I have the book also talks about my Playboy years and going to the mansion. So a lot of people like that in itself, because I did go to the mansion for many, many years. Actually, I had a line with Crystal Hefner a couple of years back. I should say the last Mrs. Hefner. I believe the last Mrs. Hefner, who is still Mrs. Hefner. But it just romps through all those kind of interesting things. And along with, I do a lot of charity work, and it talks about that, giving back. Once you've kind of hit a certain spot in life, we enjoy, my husband and I, giving back to the community, and it kind of just hits all that.
So you mentioned, I'm sorry, Rhonda, you mentioned the Comedy Store. I just want to ask this before I forget. You mentioned the Comedy Store. Did you ever meet a comedian there named Don Barris?
I feel like I know the name. From what how old, or what era? What era of? I feel like I know the name.
Yeah, he started in the 90s, like the early 90s. He was there, and now he's he's the headliner on the Ding Dong Show on the Monday nights.
Oh, maybe that's why I may know his name there. Kind of, and I still would have been out there, of course, in '91, because I was still on the road. Gosh, I was on the road until. I still actually occasionally do stuff, but definitely up into 2006 or 7, I was still, out there. So I guess I know his name from that, but I can't say I remember meeting him.
I just thought I'd
Why
ask.
would it?
No, I just thought I'd ask.
You know, maybe I'm thinking like maybe I dated him and I don't remember.
He's been out there for years, and he actually does like a lot of work with the Comedy Store. Like every night he's there, and
yeah, his name was really familiar to me. Absolutely,
because he was like him and Mark Maron are really good friends.
Okay. Well, I am sure that we came across each other, but that would have been during my Up All Night years. It was really funny, you know, and I've met so many people through my life, like through New Orleans, and then my comedy years, and then even my now apparel years, and I'll go, I know that name. There's a comic out that's doing really well out there now named Sebastian. Do you know who he is?
No, I haven't heard of him.
Okay, if you just Google Sebastian, will come up comic. I can never pronounce his last name right, but anyway, he's major. He is like major shows, major Showtime, all that stuff. And Sebastian used to wait on me as a waiter at the Four Seasons bar. We'd go there. It was around the corner from my house in Beverly Hills. And we'd go there, and he was funny. And he would say to me, I was on Up All Night at the time, and he would say, I want to be you. You know, LA has a lot of waiters that are actors, you know, I mean, it's like the only one thing I didn't do, but, you know, people that legitimately, that's their job, that's their day job or their night job. And he would say, I really admire, it was really sweet because he goes, I admire you as a female comic. And when he took off. I mean, he really took off. And I didn't even realize it because I've been so out of the loop myself, just doing my own thing in the last few years. And then I came across him like on social media, and I was like, man, I'm proud of you. I mean, because he said he was going to do it, and he did it. And he's got a whole different take. So, yeah, stand-up comedy is a really rough road. Most of my friends that even started, like I started in 84, but most of my friends that started in 84 are still doing stand-up. People usually don't leave that world. And the cool thing is you can get older and still do comedy, but you just have to find kind of different venues because, you know, there's a younger world at the comedy club. So then people move to ships, they do boats, they do, you know, comedy cruises, they do theater, you know, so you can keep at it. But I have to say, I'm happy, Dave, that I'm not out there on the road doing that for a living. Although every now and then there's a piece of me that, you know, my friend will come to town, Carol Montgomery, she's hysterical out of New York, and she gets up at a club and I'll have a couple of glasses of wine and I'll be like, I want to do what you do. And she's like, no, you don't want to give up your life. Your life is good. I said, but it's still in my blood, you know, to make people laugh. And it's still like, once it's in your blood, it's in your blood. But every now and then I do Rhonda's Pajama Party, and I'll host it, and I'll do some stand-up, and then I have like 4 other females, and sometimes I put a male comic in there. So maybe with the book coming out, we'll do that again, which would be really cool.
Yeah, I was just gonna say when the book comes out, if you do like a tour, like a
mm-hmm.
you know, if they're a tour, you get like another taste of it. So then at the end, Rhonda, you probably be like, well, you know what, I got it out of my system again, but now I'm glad I'm not doing this again until the next book, right?
Exactly. But but you know what I love doing is the speaking tours. So I'm excited about that because I did a lot of it during, you know, we won Ernst & Young and all these major entrepreneurial awards for this bra. And I mean, I didn't even think about myself as an entrepreneur, you know, but all of a sudden we're winning all these awards and it was amazing. So I found myself being asked to speak locally and regionally. And all of a sudden I'm getting up making these speeches about being an entrepreneur, but I'm funny. And then they're asking questions about my Hollywood background. So I really enjoyed it. I mean, I had never done just speaking without doing stand-up, obviously. So I'm really excited that now I'm being submitted and being asked to speak because, you know, there's a few comedic speakers, but not many that can, you know, just talk about their life and how they did it. So I'm looking forward to doing that. It's a little bit of stand-up and it's a little bit of, you know, information giving. So I look forward to that too. That may be, who knows, that may be the next sort of stand-up comedy. It'll just be, you know, entrepreneur speeches.
Yeah, and you have to do like different podcasts too, like John Lee Dumas's podcast, Entrepreneur on Fire. I'm sure you've heard of his podcast. Yeah, so it's like the one podcast in the world, right up there with like Mark Maron's and like This Is Your American Life. And but you know, I think
good. So you'll have to help me get. See, this is kind of all new to me too. You know, when you have your head I've been a very focused person in my world. So, my life has been women's wear daily and fashion. And so I'm pretty excited about opening this new chapter of, like you said, doing podcasts. I mean, I did Gilbert Gottfried's. If you talk about dirty, you're telling me I can be uncensored. If you ever go Google, I mean, I'm sure, hopefully I'll do it again, talking about my book, but if you Google and find the Rhonda Shear podcast with Gilbert Gottfried, it is beyond dirty. It is like, I mean, he and I, when we get together, I don't know what it is, but he brings out the naughty in me, and he's naughty, but he even gets naughtier. It's pretty funny. I mean, I've had people say they were walking down the street and listening to it and laughing out loud, and people like staring at them. So yeah, it was pretty funny. Because he could do impressions, so I would name different guys, from my past in Hollywood, and then he would go off and just do an impression of them, and then you're just laughing, So he's one of the quotes on the back of my book that says to buy the book. And then I have Mindy Grossman on the back, who's the CEO of Weight Watchers and was the CEO of HSN, major business person. And then I have Joy Mangano, who the movie Joy was written about. So pretty exciting, plus a lot of other friends on the inside and celebrities. But it kind of hits show business and entrepreneurs and CEOs. So I'm really excited. I know I'm talking more about the book, but I guess it's just that I'm really excited about it. Along with my line, listen, please go to rhondashear.com, go to hsn.com, check out. I have this full, amazing line of everything from the most amazing undergarments to loungewear, and I really enjoy it. We literally design everything in-house here in Florida, and then we manufacture all over the world. And most of my apparel, like my clothing, is made in the USA, and then a lot of my other pieces are made in Turkey, and we make in China, but we use beautiful factories with real high quality everything. So that's very exciting too. And when you get into that world, my husband and I taught ourselves, we didn't come from that world at all. I came from a background in show business. Next thing you know, we're reaching out to factories, and that was quite an interesting time in our lives too. But again, you're never too old to recreate and to reinvent and find another career and find love, find all those wonderful things.
Yeah, and that is such a wonderful assignment, Rhonda. And but yeah, I will definitely send you the links too to the podcast I just mentioned.
Thank you.
Just to check them out, because
please, I want to put it up for sure. Oop, there goes my dog. See, they knew the end of the podcast.
Yeah, they could feel it. So we have been talking for about 15
They're like,
minutes.
Mommy, I'm hungry.
well,
yeah, and I must acknowledge their names. We have Chicky, Tiki, Sweetie, Lexi, and Brandy. Like 2.5 are rescues. One I got at an auction, so she's kind of a rescue.
And now that you mentioned their names, they're probably like now even more eager, because they're probably like, what?
Yeah.
Is it? Did we do something? What's going on? But I will link to everything, Rhonda, that you mentioned. Your podcast.
Thank you.
And everyone listening, I will link to everything that Rhonda mentioned the show notes at davebullis.com. Rhonda, just quickly before we sign off on this episode of the podcast, I just have one final question, and I just want to ask: is there anything that you might want to just talk about or discuss, or is there anything you want to say to sort of sum up this whole podcast interview?
Well, just to sum it up, is like, I am a positive person. Everybody out there has to think positive and try to run from negativity. I mean, just don't surround yourself with negativity and don't listen. I mean, I always like to say, put a stake in it and go for it in your life. Enjoy your life. Savor your life. I love food. I love everything. In moderation, obviously. Listen, I love fine wine, but I say enjoy life, enjoy the journey of your life and of your business, and then it's fun. And just don't be negative. So that kind of sums up my life. And I've had a wonderful life so far, and hopefully it will continue to be amazing. Who knows where I'll end up next? Maybe doing a podcast. Who knows? But I thank you, Dave. It's been wonderful. And I know you're going to link, but I do have a website too, or a webpage of rhondashearspeaks.com. So that's for anybody who is interested in having me as a speaker, along with rhondashear.com, and of course Amazon with the book. And I know that you'll promote the rest. And I thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure, Rhonda. Rhonda, it has been so great talking to you.
Thank you, Dave.
It really has. But again, I used to watch USA Up All Night all the time. I know I've already mentioned that, but I thought I'd mention it again. I mean, because of you, I found the Toxic Avenger, and I've had Lloyd on. I had Lloyd on the show.
Lloyd, I love Lloyd. The last B film I did, he was in it. We had a scene together. Oh, and I was like a bad prisoner, of course, because that's what it was. It was what's the name of that film? I can't remember. But anyway, but we actually won best B film of the year. But anyway, I love Lloyd. Lloyd used to come on Up All Night all the time, and Toxie came on. I mean, literally, he was one of my regular guests. So he's a great guy, isn't he? Brilliant man. Great guy.
It was funny, really quickly, because I know you have to run. Really quickly, when he came on the podcast, he said that he started Trauma in prison with him and Michael Hertz, and he was like, well, I was Michael's prison bitch, and he's like, we got married. Well, people who listen to that podcast actually wrote into me, and they were like, Dave, is that true? Did he really form this in prison? And I said, no. I said, it would have been funny if he did, but I was like, I should have put a disclaimer before Lloyd's interview, being like, don't pay attention to anything Lloyd says. It's all.
I know. And he is so funny and so brilliant, such a family man and a great guy, and really helped us on Up All Night because he supplied such great films. And we had Toxie. What can I say? I'm not going to tell you what a good lover he was. People will believe that too.
Rhonda, it's been an absolute pleasure talking.
Thank
to you.
you. And I'm sure we'll do it again anytime, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say when the second book comes out, you have to come back on.
You got it. Or the next time I'm hosting or whatever. We'll find another reason. I'll weasel back on your show somehow.
Please, Rhonda, the door's always open. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Dave. And please send me the link, and I'll talk to you soon.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.